Good afternoon to you. 5:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Some sound for you now from Times Square this weekend, where pro-Hamas sympathizers assembled to express themselves.
From the river to the sea.
From the river to the sea.
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea.
From the river to the sea.
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
The group chanting for the destruction of Israel. That's what that means, from the river to the sea. For more on this, the man who captured that footage joins us now. Julio Rosas, a senior writer for Town Hall and the author of the book Fiery But Mostly Peaceful, The 2020 Riots and the Gaslighting of America. Julio, good to have you back with us, sir.
It was a hectic weekend, Vince.
It's crazy. So did you get the sense that the people out there were explicitly supportive of Hamas?
Yeah. I mean, it was weird because they weren't, kind of couching their, they weren't saying we support a free Palestine, but we don't support how they're going about it. One of the speakers at that rally right in Times Square, was talking about how great the initial invasion was, and how many rockets they were able to fire at Israel, reaching Tel Aviv, and the entire crowd was cheering for it.
Let me play that audio. Julio captured this weekend. Listen to what he captured here.
Early morning on Saturday, October 7th, our resistance stormed illegal settlements and paraglided across colonial borders. Into the largest military base around Gaza, Karim Abu Salim.
All right.
In this operation, Al-Aqsa Flood,
Sister, are you part of the organizers?
resistance fired more than 5,000 rockets. Reaching Tel Aviv.
That's an explicit support for the attack, Julio. And I can't help but notice that's a woman who is saying all of that. She must be either cognizant of or blocking out entirely the fact that you had countless women who were raped, killed, and taken hostage by Hamas.
I mean, yeah, there's no other way to explain it. And really, it just shows that, this conflict, as complicated as it is, they really have the ends justify the means attitude towards it. And the reason why that's concerning is because of how many people showed up in support of that rally and participated in that yesterday. At first, it was only a couple dozen people, but probably about an hour or so later, when they started to march to the General Consulate of Israel by the UN headquarters, it was close to 1,000 people who were marching as part of this, organized rally. And so there really is this mindset where, things like that need to take place because, it's happened to us, so we got to do it back to them. And, obviously there's plenty of Jewish people that live here, that have businesses and, made their lives here. And
Yes.
So it's worrying that if this thing escalates even more, that, is that hatred going to spill out to the streets of America? It's already happened in London. I was seeing reports there where Jewish businesses were being targeted over in London because, there's a bunch of, radicals that have now made their lives over there as well. So, this can spiral out of control very quickly, not just in Israel, but within the rest of the world.
So that's a good point. So there's a downside, in other words, to not controlling your borders, right? London's experiencing that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's why, it's not exactly the same situation, but there are parallels to, what's happening with our own southern border and to, how people were able to take advantage of the weak spots and take advantage of the complacency that happened on Saturday. So it really should send a warning to the country and to our leadership. But, of course, Biden, I don't even know, where is he right now? He's already called the lid today. Yeah, exactly. Right. So our leadership is absent. So it really doesn't, it's really terrible foreshadowing for our own country. And I'm not saying this to be hyperbolic, but this really has brought some of the worst fears that I've had, covering our own border crisis to, back to the forefront, because again, when you have enemies, they're going to exploit weaknesses, whether you give them up willingly or not.
Totally true. New York City was not the only place where you had pro-Hamas people assembling in the United States. It also happened outside the White House. This was filmed by our friend Matthew Foldy, who captured this, again, outside the White House yesterday. Listen to this. The audio is glory to all the resistance fighters. They've got tanks. We've got hang gliders. All right, so it doesn't get really much more explicit than that, does it, Julio, where you have people straight up chanting about the tactics Hamas used, because they floated across the border, many of these guys, on hang gliders before then, again, they raped, killed, and took hostages.
Yeah, and this really shows that there really is no bottom to any of this. I mean, it's again, I'm not trying to I always constantly be the doom and gloom guy whenever I come on your show, but this is a real sentiment, and things are going to become more heated with everything else that we've got going on. I mean, we've got the election coming up, and our relationship with Israel will definitely be at the forefront now.
Yes.
And how that gets proceeded forward, and if this sizable population in our country doesn't like, if we were going to give more support or stand by Israel, they might take action, whether beyond just chance. And that's not trying to again be just be the sky is falling, but these are real threats. I mean, you had people in Times Square dressing up almost like Hamas. They had the bandanas, they had the head wraps. I mean, they had the whole getup essentially, and that was right next to the Armed Forces Recruiting Center, right there in that popular tourist destination. So I'm pretty worried more than ever. And it's only a matter of time to see whether or not any of this is going to come to fruition. I'm sorry,
Julio, did you say that, you may have just said it, so forgive me if you did, but that you did see people dressed in Antifa garb?
No, Hamas.
Okay, so Hamas-style garb. The reason I'm asking is because your colleague at Town Hall, a guy called Phil Holloway, he captured some footage outside the White House as well, and he indicated on Twitter yesterday that he spotted several people who were dressed like Antifa in all black garb with their faces covered. Did you see anything like that in New York?
No, but I mean, I'm not surprised that there's going to be some overlap there, because I mean, they have the same kind of ideology in terms of decolonization and because they hate the United States as well and everything in its current state, and so there's a lot of commonalities between, and they see themselves as freedom fighters, whether it's people who in the Gaza Strip or people who Portland, Oregon, right? I mean, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is more joint partnerships, if you can say that, between the two, just because they have so much in common in terms of their ideology, and tactics.
Yeah, and it's just wild too, because fundamentally there's a real loathing for the Western world built into all of this. And I would say that the people, American citizens in particular, who refer to America as being a colonizer or something stupid like that, these are ingrates. They're people ungrateful for their circumstances. You live in the greatest country on the planet, under the greatest circumstances you could possibly imagine in world history, and you're sitting there going, we're the bad guys to attack your own country? And you've witnessed a ton of that, Julio.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I'm more worried than ever about whether things can happen here moving forward, because the conditions to get people off the bench, as it were, to kind of get back into the game of things,
yes,
swing of things, because and we're at our weakest point. Police departments are defunded, crime is at an all-time high. People are struggling financially, and so I mean, all those things really radicalizes people. And when they see that, also this is happening, across the world in this long struggle against imperialism, quote unquote, and colonialism, quote unquote. But I'm seeing the conditions to be created for another kind of hectic year, especially because we're entering another presidential election cycle.
How critical do you think this presidential election cycle is, Julio?
I mean, I know. See, I've always heard it. It's the most important election in our lifetime, and
Sure.
I kind of hate to kind of echo that. But in my view, in my short 27 years on this earth, I really do think it's a make or break, because I mean, putting everything else aside, I don't see economically how we can continue going the way that we've been going under the Biden administration. I can't see how the border situation can continue on for another 4 years. I really don't. And if it does, I mean, okay, I'm going to be busy for the next 4 years in terms of that. But for the overall health of the nation, I don't see how that's going to be viable. I really don't. And so this is definitely, I mean, in my view, a make or break moment for us.
Of course. Yeah, the closer you get to your own country's destruction, the more important the efforts to stop it are. And that's definitely true, I think, going into next year. And man, you talk about you have been right on the front line of covering so much of the decline, whether it was the George Floyd riots in 2020, or certainly our collapsing border, or the ongoing crime in our cities, or the occupations by leftists who turn various spots in American cities into, anarchy zones. You've seen a lot of it, and I don't actually know how you stay so cheerful, Julio. Like, your disposition's still pretty cheerful in light of all of that.
Oh well, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I won't lie, because it's kind of a front row seat, and you don't really see an end to it. But I mean, if I lose my mind, then I can't continue doing what I do. So
Sure.
I certainly find my ways to try to decompress from everything. But I'm admittedly myself. I mean, I was in DC for a wedding this weekend. I wasn't planning on going to New York to cover all this, but I was caught off guard myself in my own way. And so, I learned my lesson. And so from now on, whenever I'm not traveling for work, I'm going to still be packing and taking everything with me that in case I need to go cover something, because that's what I had to do in 2020 and into 2021, because we're certainly in uncertain times.
Yeah.
So for me and for what I do, I'm going to make sure that if something happens when I'm away from home and I can't, I'm going to make sure I'm going to be ready.
And my guess is that New York City has more cameras per square mile than any other city on the planet, and it took you driving up from Washington, D.C. to get us the footage we're now consuming. So that's also a media commentary for what it's worth. Julio Rosas, thank you very much. Good to talk to you, sir. Really appreciate your time, as always. There's a piece from the Washington Examiner today. Headline, Israel war Tlaib, as in Rashida Tlaib, Democrat from Michigan, still has a Palestinian flag hanging outside of her house office. That's right here on Capitol Hill. Not an American flag, a Palestinian flag. She has. In fact, I don't think she even has an American flag. I'm looking at the flags that are outside of her office. More on that in a moment, but I don't see a flag of the United States of America. Perhaps I'm mistaken. Maybe it's out of the frame. I do see a so-called Palestinian flag. Representative Rashida Tlaib still has a Palestinian flag hanging outside of her house office after the invasion of Israel by Hamas, during which hundreds of Israelis and some Americans were killed. Over the weekend, Hamas, a Palestinian militia group whose mission is to destroy Israel, invaded Israel and bombarded the country with missiles. The surprise attack killed at least 600 Israelis and left 2,000 wounded. Those numbers have gone up fairly dramatically, actually, since this report was written. It is reported that at least 9 Americans have also been killed. Now that's 11, according to the statement the White House put out. Tlaib, who is of Palestinian descent, the Examiner says, has not supported Israel and has made her stance on supporting Palestine known throughout the years. The Michigan Democrat, along with other members of the liberal squad, boycotted the Israeli president's joint address to Congress earlier this year. The flag outside of her office has been there through at least the majority of this Congress. Quote, I grieve the Palestinian and Israeli lives lost yesterday, today, and every day, she said in a statement Sunday. These people can't even get the statements right. I am determined as ever to fight for a just future where everyone can live in peace without fear and with true freedom, equal rights, and human dignity. How does raping and hostage-taking factor into that particular judgment there, Rashida Tlaib? The path to the future must include lifting the blockade, ending the occupation, and dismantling the apartheid system. She goes on and on. So she attacks, this is her view of Israel, that they're leading an apartheid state, that they're occupiers, that they're blockading, on and on and on. So again, in her own statement, she can't resist attacking Israel after Israel is attacked by terrorists. Now, Matthew Foldy, who is relentless, apparently. We keep citing him throughout the show because he keeps doing all this original reporting. He took a picture outside of Rashida Tlaib's office today, and it gives us a wider shot of the flags there. And again, I don't see the American flag in this image, but I do see an LGBT flag. So right next to the Palestinian flag is an LGBT flag, and this is how Matthew Foldy describes it. He said, "This is a great Washington Examiner story, but it's actually even funnier," he writes. "Right next to the flag of the non-existent country of Palestine, Rashida Tlaib has an LGBT flag. I just took this picture. This is a contradiction so irreconcilable that I won't bother," said Matt. Yeah, what do they do to gay people in what Rashida Tlaib calls Palestine? Look out below? Is that what you say to them? Pushing them off of roofs and cliffs? Yeah, murdering. They murder the people for whom Rashida Tlaib flies the pride flag. It is so crazy. It'd be like flying an Israeli flag and a swastika right next to each other and thinking that makes sense. Well, I support all people. What? What the hell is wrong with you? We've been asking that question for a while about Rashida Tlaib. Coming up, I've got some election news for you. Democrats are panicking that there is ballot box stuffing going on in one race, which is between two Democrats. You are going to believe this story, and the media is trying to suffocate it from getting attention, which is why we will give it some air, the air that it deserves, ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 now, WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Donald Trump Jr. tweeted about an hour ago the following. He said, "If you don't yet own an AR-15, you really need to think that through right about now," he said. A sign that things are getting increasingly unstable. You may have to take protecting your family into your own hands. Always a good idea to be ready for any eventuality. I saw, where was it this weekend? It must have been like a CNN headline. It was one of these places, but I got a push alert on my phone about the AR-15. And always, it's never complimentary. It's never like, how to use it safely, how to get good range time in. Nothing like that. It's always like, Americans love their AR-15s. Where we go from here. I didn't even click it. I was like, I'm not even going to bother. I know what this is about. It was like, it's very dangerous that these Americans want to take protecting their own families into their own hands. It's crazy. Why would Americans do that? I don't know. Have you looked around? Have you turned on the news? Are you following anything? You aware of how unstable everything is? Yeah, Americans are historically resourceful. They look out for themselves and their family. They look out for their communities, especially if they actually know their neighbors. You know? There was a time in this country where you didn't need to turn to an app to find someone who could watch your kids for a couple hours, right? You didn't need to turn to an app for that. Like, oh, shoot. We got an emergency. What do we do? Well, leave your kids next door. Joe will take care of them. Jill's there, whatever. That was a normal thing. What is it now? It's changed a lot, hasn't it? A lot of social distrust, communities collapsing, a lot more crime, a lot more concern. In D.C. area, let's be honest. If you live outside D.C. right now and you have an errand that involves D.C., you're thinking about it, aren't you? You're like, you got to find the right place to park. You want the safe parking garage. You're looking for something that's, you don't want to, I can't go over there. I mean, I don't even know where you could go specifically these days. Even the, quote, nicer areas of town have been subjected to some of this chaos. And so your distrust level goes up, doesn't it? You're not as trusting. The likeliness that you're going to roll down that window and deal with that panhandler, throw out a buck. You're the guilty conscience inside of you saying, hey, you should give that guy $1. Well, that's going down. And maybe, maybe for a good cause. We want to get rid of the panhandlers. It's not a sign of a functioning society. You can usually judge how out of control things are when the panhandling goes up and up and up. But it does seem like we're in a very fraught time. And of course, the left isn't going to like a tweet like this. If you don't own an AR-15, you really need to think that through right about now, says Don Jr. He's right, though. He's right. And it doesn't have to be an AR-15, but it's a great gun. It's a great gun. And it's good for all sorts of people. It's a great gun to learn to shoot on. It's a great gun for women. The recoil's low. So there are all sorts of advantages to the AR-15. Pretty reliable thing. But, have your pick. Go talk to your local gun expert, the guy in your family who knows what he's talking about. Have that conversation sooner rather than later. And, of course, always adhere to best practices, safety, and get some range time. Learn how to use it. Okay. On to the election for a moment. We do have an announcement today from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He is done with the rigged Democrat Party. He's finally determined that it's a rigged game and he has no chance inside of that system. Now, it is true they have an incumbent, but that guy is the crappiest single incumbent in any of our lifetimes. Like, if the Democrats were looking for an opportunity to swing out of this, they maybe an open primary process, but no, they're not looking for that. They like controlling the basement dweller, Joe Biden. So Robert F. Kennedy has been excluded in every possible way, and that includes his own safety, right? After a man arrived armed with what seemed like pretty clear intentions to hurt yet another Kennedy in the United States of America, RFK's been asking for all this Secret Service protection. He gets nothing. Biden has turned him down, refused that. Here's RFK today in Philadelphia announcing he's done running as a Democrat. He'll now be running as an independent.
We do face an entrenched political corruption and an inequality of wealth not seen in a century. But the good news is that people like yourselves are finally fed up. Something is stirring in us that says it doesn't have to be this way. People stop me everywhere at airports, at hotels and malls, on the street, and they remind me that this country is ready for a history-making change. They are ready to reclaim their freedom, their independence. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here to declare myself an independent candidate.
A lot of cheering from the in attendance crowd. He's an independent now. Bobby. So what happens now with this? Well, a couple things worth noting. One, he is quite obviously, in many ways, still a dyed-in-the-wool left-winger. The RNC appropriately unleashing a series of tweets today indicating that they are ready for this combat against RFK. And they said in a statement attributed to Ronna McDaniel, they say, RFK Jr. cannot hide from his record of endorsing Hillary, supporting the Green New Deal, fighting against the Keystone Pipeline, and praising AOC's tax hikes. He's your typical elitist liberal, and voters won't be fooled, she said. Now, to the extent that RFK has attracted some attention on the right, a lot of it has had to do with, of course, like questioning the dangers of the big government, big pharma alliance, right? And all of the tyranny associated with COVID. And that's the reason, if anybody's head turned, it was because of that. What's going on over there with RFK? Why is he saying this stuff out loud? And if you're being honest with yourself, and if I'm being honest with myself, you kind of enjoy watching a Democrat with the last name Kennedy calling out his own party for its tyranny, right? There's the Schadenfreude, they say. You kind of enjoy that feature of it. Now, the question does come down to, will there be support for RFK among people who would otherwise vote for, say, Donald Trump? in a 2024 election contest? Or is he going to be drawing from upset, dejected, previous Joe Biden supporters? That's the fundamental question, because when you have a third-party candidate, an independent, and if he gets access to all of these ballots, he definitely is going to play some role. Now, how big is that? We'll see. But in the swing states, we're only talking tens of thousands of votes that separated Joe Biden and Donald Trump in the last election. So a third party plays a huge role here. Rasmussen out with a survey today. If the 2024 Democratic presidential candidate is Joe Biden and the Republican candidate is Donald Trump, and Robert F. Kennedy runs as a third-party presidential candidate, how likely is it that you would vote for Kennedy? Here's what the survey says. Among the people who responded, it's likely that they would vote for Kennedy. Democrats, 33% of Democrat respondents say that. Independents, 28%. Republicans, 14%. And among all respondents, 25%. So a quarter of voters, or a quarter of the respondents to this Rasmussen poll, say that they would support Robert F. Kennedy. Now, I think the most important news of this poll is that Democrats are twice as likely, more than twice as likely, to say that they would rather vote for RFK than their own party's nominee. Whereas Republicans are half as likely as Democrats to say that. Now, that's a great sign. That is a fantastic sign. It means this may be a meaningful way to bring an end to the Biden presidency. That you do have a spoiler on the ticket, that Robert F. Kennedy will help make sure Joe Biden, or whoever the Democrats want to put in there, is unseated. That could be good. But there are massive caveats to all of this. One, this polling data is so far away from the election, it's hard to construe it as meaningful, as all that useful, other than sort of a, just a snapshot in time today. Also, you do have to think about the Democrats who are involved here. We often look back and we go, how did Democrats keep supporting these people? Even if the circumstances are horrific, especially if the circumstances are horrific in any particular community where Democrats keep getting reelected. And the answer is, for the most part, in the end, a lot of these Democrat voters, they always come home. No matter what they're griping about right now, they'll show up in the balloting, however that balloting is conducted, as supporting the Democrat. And so 33% may be saying right now, I'd rather support RFK than Joe Biden. Harumph. And they stomp their feet. But it's really a virtue signal. And if any party specializes in virtue signaling, it's the Democrats. No question. So, again, massive caveats here. Another person to pay attention to while we're on the subject of third parties is socialist Professor Cornel West. He is now mounting an independent candidacy as well. And he's going to appear on some ballots, maybe a lot of them. And when he does, if you're one of those full-blown like Bernie Sanders socialists out there, and you see Joe Biden as one of those dirty neoliberals, he's not socialist enough for you, then Cornel West, if he appears on the ballot, he could be a troublemaker. And to the extent that that's a problem for these Democrat strategists right now, that is the name that they keep bringing up. They're like, oh, this Cornel West, why is he running? He needs to get out. He's gonna make Donald Trump president of the United States again. Well, if he does, God bless him. Thanks, Cornel. Thanks for the help. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I do have a story of some Democrats who are apparently trying to steal the election from each other, or at least it appears to be the case. Here's the Associated Press story out this weekend. Drop boxes have become key to election conspiracy theories. 2 Democrats just fueled those claims. You ready for this? 2 Democrats. The Associated Press has to admit that there's a massive problem with drop boxes going on in Connecticut. Dateline, Hartford, Connecticut. A woman approaches a drop box in the dark with what appears to be handfuls of ballots. At a different drop box, someone else is seen making multiple trips to insert ballots. At yet another, the same car stops on at least 3 separate occasions with different people stepping out and heading to the box. It's not a trailer for the latest conspiracy movie about rigged elections, the Associated Press says. Instead, the video footage has become central to a real-world controversy over potential fraud involving ballot drop boxes, a favorite target of right-wing conspiracy theorists since former President Donald Trump's loss in the 2020 election. The accusations of drop box fraud are not coming from those pushing fringe election claims or from skeptical Republicans who have long favored eliminating or severely restricting the use of the boxes. They're being made by Democrats, two candidates vying for mayor in Connecticut's largest city in a heavily Democratic state that began allowing drop boxes to be used during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, let me pause here for a moment. What you just heard was 3 paragraphs of what we call throat clearing. I don't want to have to tell you this. Normally, bad people talk about this issue, but to the extent we have to talk about it at all, it involves Democrats, which means that these claims are legitimate. They have credibility, that the drop boxes may actually be stuffed here, and these Democrats may be rightfully worried. You see what's happening? In other words, if the party affiliation is Democrats, well, they may have a claim. They may have a point here. But if the party affiliation is Republicans, you idiots, you're just making that up. That's a conspiracy theory. There's nothing to it, right? The Associated Press is trying to, not just wink and nod at its audience, but scream out to its audience, we're not Republicans. Don't think we're Republicans for reporting on this. But you'd think they would notice that these are 2 Democrats who are accused of defrauding each other. Also, this idea that Democrats have never made fraudulent claims about fraud is ridiculous. Every presidential election this century where a Republican has won, what have Democrats in the House done? They've alleged the election was stolen. They said that the 2000 election was stolen from Al Gore. They said that the 2004 election was subsequently stolen from John Kerry. They said that the 2016 election was stolen from Hillary Clinton and that the Russians were in on it. And in fact, if you go back to 2004, they even said that voting machines were manipulated in order to get the outcome of George W. Bush winning re-election. So spare me the lecture, Associated Press. Oh, Democrats never engage in this type of rhetoric. Really? They've definitely done it before. They go on to point out Republicans have seized on the spat in Connecticut, which is now headed to a legal showdown that could result in a new election, to say it validates their concerns that drop boxes are ripe for fraud. Well, yeah, if it's happening, it would validate your concern that drop boxes are ripe for fraud. At one point, Democrats like Jimmy Carter were saying out loud that you should be voting in person on a paper ballot with an ID. That's what they were saying. Not because that induces voter suppression, but because it is a good way to make sure that you have an election system with integrity and that people can believe. State Representative Doug Dubitsky, a Republican, evoked the widely debunked movie 2,000 Mules. 2,000 Mules was not, quote, widely debunked. That's not even, they're just making things up now. During a legislative debate over the controversy surrounding the Bridgeport mayor's race. Quote, how do we know that it's only Bridgeport, said Dubitsky, who represents an area of the state that has grown more conservative in the Trump era. This exact thing could be happening in every single municipality in this state. We should get rid of these boxes completely. On the surface, the controversy is a local matter. 2 candidates are accusing each other of fraud. Democrats. 2 Democrats are accusing each other of fraud in a municipal election. But its ripple effects travel far beyond the city of 148,000 and could have implications for the elections next year across the country. All right. So this Associated Press piece is hilarious. It says, well, the claims of voter fraud may be very credible here, but don't let Republicans notice. And if they do, they better not think for a moment that there are problems with drop boxes. It's like, this is the most bizarre news piece I've read this week, and we've read a lot of them. Well, that's all they'll let me do today. So check out the podcast, of course, the Vince Coglianese Show. You can get it every day. And follow me on what they call X now. It used to be Twitter. You know, if I were you, I'm not you, but if I were you, I'd hang tight because the great one, Mark Levin, is up next year on WMAL, and he's must listen.